Okay. Let's see. It says we are live. But I'm not seeing it. Here we go. All right. We are live on LinkedIn. Very exciting. Hi, everyone. Well, welcome to Review Tracker's first ever LinkedIn Live. We are here with our wonderful guest, Pat McParland, from HR.
Okay.
Very excited to have you here, as well as Elijah Karlberg from Review Tracker. She's our talent and culture lead. We're going to give everyone a couple minutes to just join us today. And yeah, we're going to dive into our great topic about using employee data to help be predictive and make decisions for your organization. Awesome.
Great. Looking forward to it, Chelsea.
Yeah.
Excited.
Really excited to have you guys here. How's your week been going so far?
Well, it's going okay. I mean, every week in this kind of strange time is a little bit the same and a little different at the same time. You never know quite what day it is. I think it's Thursday, so.
I know. I feel like every Monday I'm like, wait, is it Tuesday? Is it?
It is a little bit of a time warp, but it's good to be here.
Yes, exactly.
One thing I've actually really appreciated about this is like cooking a lot more and, making time for lunch and like having healthy lunch options and preparing for that. So it's been great.
Good.
Yeah.
I've definitely been, I don't know about cooking, but I've definitely been eating more being home.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay. A lot of proximity to snacks. So.
That's really funny.
That's great. Awesome. Well, I think we're starting to get a few people joining and listening in. So with that, I just want to remind everyone, feel free to submit some questions during our discussion. We'll be sure to get all of them answered at the very end and maybe even throughout. So feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions for this live stream. But to get things started, we're going to introduce everyone. To start, I'm Chelsea. I'm the social media and community manager here at Review Trackers, and I'm going to help be the moderator of today's discussion. I'd also, like I mentioned earlier on, I'd like to welcome our guest, Pat McParland, who's the Vice President of Marketing at HR Acuity, and Elijah Karlberg, who's Review Trackers' talent and culture lead. So without further ado, Pat, if you want to give a quick little intro about yourself and what you do at HR Acuity, and then we can move on to Elijah.
Sure. So thank you for the introduction. And as you said, I'm the head of marketing at HR Acuity. And HR Acuity is an employee relations technology platform. So essentially what that means is we help companies manage their employee relations, which are all the interactions between an employee and the company. So we help them manage things like bias, harassment, discrimination, and make sure that those things are documented, tracked, analyzed. The ultimate goal being to help employees have a better experience and companies be able to protect their employees as well as their reputation. So it's a really great company, and I really enjoy working there. I've been there almost 2 years. So
great. And Elijah?
Yeah, my name is Elijah Karlberg, and I am the talent and culture lead at Review Trackers. We are a SaaS mature startup company in Chicago, and essentially what we do is we aggregate reviews for our customers and bring them onto our platform so they can handle reputation management, and have a presence online for their marketing. For me internally, I run the recruitment team, and I'm also in charge of our internal culture of the company. So excited to talk with you guys about employee branding and just how that helps everybody in the long run.
Great. So we have some questions kind of to get this conversation started. And as I mentioned, if anyone has individual questions, you could feel free to leave them in this live stream. But to kind of start things off, I'm going to go into what is an employer brand and why is it important for each of your organizations?
Pat, you can go first.
Great. Yeah, no, I'm sure I'm happy to go first. So I think an employer brand is, just like a brand in the real world, an external brand. So if you think of, any brand that resonates with you, whether that's, Google or Nike or Apple or whatever your favorite external brand is in the real world, you have associations with that. So it's kind of everything that brand stands for. And the same thing is true with an employer brand internally. So if I'm trying to recruit an employee or have an employee experience, I think of it as sort of the accumulation of all the experiences that an employee has with an employer. So who you are and what you stand for. And like an external brand, it's also a promise, and you have to live up to that promise. So it has to be authentic, so all the experiences that an employee has with your organization need to live up to that promise that you make. That's how I would define an employee brand. And it's really, really important because there's a lot of competition for talent in the marketplace, so from a hiring perspective. But it's also really important from an employee perspective, because employees want to work in, great atmospheres that are, safe and fair. And, they want to work in places where employers live up to their promises. So those are my thoughts about the employer brand.
Pat, I think that's great. And also similar to what I was going to say, I think the main thing you said that was super powerful was authenticity. Your employer brand, for how do I look at it from a recruiting standpoint, and also just where I sit in my company, is that your employer brand reflects your internal environment. So, if your employees are leaving reviews, on Glassdoor, Indeed, whatever the case may be, maybe you're, a restaurant organization, your customers leave reviews about, what went right and what's going wrong within your restaurant organization. People pay attention to that. I've purposely bought stuff because I saw the reviews and they weren't good. Why would I waste my time with that? So, to kind of tee into what you said about recruiting, if employees are leaving, reviews about what's internally, not going right or is going right in your organization, other people who are interested are going to be taking a look at that and are going to be deciding based off of someone's other judgment whether they should be applying or not. So totally agree with you.
Yeah. And just to pick up on something that you said, there's something that our founder, Deb Muller, who used to be an HR executive and a workplace investigator, she says a lot is everyone today has a microphone in their pocket with social media. And so every employee is an ambassador of your company. And so, it's not, everybody is, looking to the employee also for the representation of the brand. And so you're absolutely right about the reviews. I mean, if you're looking for a new restaurant, you might ask your friend, but you're probably going to go to Yelp and look up things. Yep. And, if you want to find something to read, you're going to go to Amazon and look at the reviews. I mean, it's not the same as it used to be. We're definitely living in a review and a feedback economy. So it's extended to the workplace as well. And past retention as well. I mean, past hiring as well. It's also retention. Once you're in the company, it's not just getting in the door, but everything that happens once the employee is in the door, making sure that the experience is not only positive, but also, fair, that people are treated fairly once they're in. So I think it's a really important topic. So.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. Good points. So let's kind of transition to the next question then. What sites should I be using to listen to employee feedback? Pat, I threw you under the bus with the last question, so I could take this one.
Okay.
Yeah, I mentioned in my previous remark that for us, we really take a look at Glassdoor and Indeed, and this is specific to where obviously I sit in my company and what we do, so I want to preface that ahead of time. But really, we track and we actually encourage our employees to leave feedback on their experience that they've had, whether they're a previous employee or whether they're a past employee. I think Glassdoor, asks you, after if you've left a company to leave a review kind of automatically. But it's really great for us to see, from an anonymous standpoint, people's opinions about us. A lot of people don't like feedback. I've had to work personally on accepting feedback and adjusting moving forward. And so it is awkward, especially if you're on the receiving end of it, because nobody wants to think that like they need to improve on things. That's, or at least I don't, or I haven't previously, but it's really a great place for us to get that insight. And actually, if you go to our Glassdoor and take a look at it, all of our reviews that have been left about us, somebody in the company, and previously our CEO didn't, I think our marketing team, handles it still now, but we answered those back, and we actually engage with those individuals that have left reviews just to let them know, like, hey, we've heard what you've said. And moving forward, we're going to, make sure that we're keeping this in mind. So that way we're correcting the feedback that you're giving us, or we're highlighting, what is going right. And we're making sure that future wise and future, candidates and potential employees do see that, and they do see that we do actually care about that. So yeah, so I say about that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, and I think, internally feedback is really important too. And one of the things that we mostly work with HR departments and employee relations leaders who are sometimes usually part of the HR department. And we encourage them to also ask employees for feedback on the experience working with HR or working with the employee relations department. So you're probably familiar with the idea of an NPS score,
Yep.
and rating your experience with a product or consumer kind of experience, and you can do the same thing inside of a company. So what was my experience with HR or this interaction, and that kind of feedback is really important too, because you're building the the relationship, kind of the relations part of employee relations. So I think all these types of feedback are really critical to building the experience. I like to quote other people. I'm sorry, I'm probably going to quote like 40 different people, but I had this gentleman that worked on one of my marketing teams, and he used to always say, the echo starts from the inside out. It starts with the team member and then goes outside. And I always remember that of the employees being such an important part of the feedback and the experience.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I think you made a good point. We also do internal surveys as well here. And I wanted to kind of ask you and pivot a little bit, do you share with your internal employees the next steps that you're going to take based off the feedback that they left them? We do. We work on that and let them know that we've heard what they've said. So I just was curious about kind of your workflow over there.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the organization. So one of the things we talk a lot about with employee relations and HR clients in particular is this concept of creating a culture of transparency and trust, which is a lot of what we're talking about today, because this is back and forth feedback. And so how much are you going to share with employees? And so the goal is to be as transparent as possible. And sometimes you can be really transparent, and sometimes you can't necessarily. For example, I'm going to give you an example of something like a workplace investigation. Let's say somebody makes an allegation of harassment or something like that. A lot of those are, conducted kind of behind the scenes because they have to be. And people's reputations are at stake and those sorts of things. But there's a way to do the kind of share information about that without necessarily sharing individual information. One company that I'm thinking of in particular shares information about the process as opposed to the individual investigations. And they call that transparency of process as opposed to transparency of outcomes. So, but I think the goal is to be as transparent as possible with information. And obviously it's going to vary according to the company, but I mean, it's a little bit different than the question that you asked me, which is, do people directly share information from the feedback? But I think it kind of depends on the organization, but I think the ultimate goal is forward-looking organizations are definitely moving toward this goal or aspiration of being as transparent as possible because employees are demanding that. So
yeah, well, that great points. I think that kind of segues into our next question that we had was, what should I do with the employee feedback data and how should I organize it? Transparency is a word that we use a lot at Review Trackers. We track other companies' reviews. Why wouldn't we share that with our own employees when they have reviews about us, or opinions and thoughts and stuff like that? So that's great that you do that. I actually use a platform where we send out anonymous surveys biannually, and I take that data and kind of pinpoint 3 things that we know that we're seeing a repetition of. And based off of that data, I share that with the company in regards to like, hey, we heard you, and this is the steps that we're going to be doing over the next 6 months for, us to kind of alleviate that as well. And I think that, I know it builds trust with people. It builds trust with myself. If I see my company doing that and I feel comfortable sharing, moving forward, if there's a repetition of it, what's really going right and what's really not going right in my eyes, and watching my company and the leaders of the company, step up to say that we've heard you without really, any repercussions of that, or like them directly coming at you for sharing, is really, really, really refreshing. And I think you get more authenticity to kind of loop back around with what you said in the beginning in regards to the feedback that people are leaving you. So.
I totally agree. And even when, so you said something interesting there. Well, you said many interesting things, but one thing that popped out was when things go wrong. And so if something does, sometimes things do go wrong at work, and employees have issues and they want to report them. And, so what happens with those sorts of, issues and investigations and the outcomes of those. And one thing that we've heard over and over is it's not even always the outcome of what happens. It's that people want to be communicated with during the process, and it's more how were they treated during the process.
Yep.
That is most important. I mean, obviously, the outcome is important, but it's also I don't want to feel like my feedback went into, or my allegation or whatever went into a black hole and then I never heard anything again. It's really more the treatment and the back and forth communication, the transparency of the process again is really, really important. So, yeah.
I think that, again, that goes into a really great point for our next question is, when you have negative online feedback, what should you actually do with that? And Pat, you mentioned, again, transparency. I don't know of any company under the sun that will never not have something that they need to improve on. And really building that feedback culture of having these conversations and normalizing it, and making it okay to share their opinions. I do believe is the way forward to like a truly healthy, open, communicative company that's really always innovating their process and taking and receiving that feedback well. So did you want to add any comments onto, like what you should do with the negative online employee feedback?
I guess the only thing that I'll add is, in addition to feedback, it's also behavioral information. So, and a lot of the information that we would deal with at HR Acuity would be more not just what people say, but what they do. So, for example, performance management type issues or those types of things. And, whether it's, negative feedback or anything, I think the most important thing is a couple of things, but I think the process is really important. Process is maybe not a real exciting word, but I think it's really, really important that anytime anything happens, that it's documented and that there's a record of this and that this happens consistently and that employees are aware of where they need to go to report these types of things so that there's a record. And so whether it's positive feedback or negative feedback, that there's a consistent record over time. So it's not just a, he said, she said, whatever, that it's just a one incident kind of thing. and you can look at patterns over time and what people are actually doing versus what's being said. So it's a little bit of a different spin to your question there, but I think it's I think one thing I want to read into that is like sometimes the something I've seen with negative feedback. And you're more the expert on the feedback than I, but sometimes I see the negative feedback on Glassdoor and things like that, and sometimes it seems like it comes from employees that may be disgruntled and those kinds of things, and you have to kind of take the measure of the whole picture, like the aggregate, not just the one person. And that's why I think it's important to look at the aggregate picture as well as just the one incident.
Yeah, I would like to comment too. Like one thing that our platform actually does that's super interesting is that we use NLP, which is natural language processing, and it actually helps us identify the negative and positive reviews by filtering those comments that people are saying. So that way you can address things more quickly and more consistently and precise with that. So super, I don't know. This stuff is super interesting to me.
It is really interesting to me too.
I can talk about it forever.
It is. I mean, because there's two sides of everything. Because you also can't say, well, I've got to discount that one comment because that comment's important, right? So it's both. It's important to look at the individual, and then it's important to look at the patterns across the aggregate. So they both matter. So
completely agree.
But that aggregate is so big. Like when you talk about natural language processing and machine learning and artificial intelligence, and what kind of promise do those things hold to really, and predictive analytics, like what promise do those hold to help all of us kind of sift through all of that data so we can predict, understand, uncover the trends and the patterns, and say where are issues occurring.
Totally. And I think it's important to note too, that some people just want a space to like vent, what's been going on, and really sifting through like that venting versus like, which I guess venting can be, constructive feedback, but, venting versus like really like we need to actually implement this, and change our process moving forward based off of what a collective number of people have said. So totally in agreement with you on that. That's great.
I feel like this segues well into one of our last questions about, are there any tools I can use to uncover certain issues before they arise? I know that we sort of went through a few, but do you have any additions with this point?
Well, certainly I might like to talk a little bit about HR Acuity. And there are other HR tools as well, but I think the thing that's unique about HR Acuity is that it helps companies track employee relations issues, and we talk about them. One of the ways that we talk about them is as red light, yellow light, green light issues. And so green light would be everyday kind of employee issues. You're doing all the things that you should be doing. Yellow lights are Kelsey's coming to work a little bit late, those sort of like everyday kind of things. And then red light issues are more serious issues like discrimination, harassment, those kinds of things. And those are real kinds of employee relations and employee issues that arise. And you really want to be able to forestall the red lights. You don't want to get to those red lights. You want to be able to see the signs before they happen. And so all the things we talked about today, having processes in place, documenting issues, making sure you're transparent, your employees know what's going on. Those are really critical things to do, having the right data. But I think it's really critical to get ahead of that. And by the time something hits, a hashtag, it's too late, so you want to you want to get ahead of it so that you can uncover these patterns and say, oh, hey, I see this is, there's an issue in Peoria. I'm not insulting Peoria, but there's an issue in this part of the country, or there's an issue in the marketing department, you have all that, you can collect all that data, and then you can analyze that data and look for the patterns in the employee experiences, just as you would with the feedback, so what the people are doing, people are reporting. I think the external feedback, from the review sites is really important too. I think all these things come together in kind of like a a mosaic or a quilt of data that needs to be analyzed, that you look for patterns or signals to say, hey, these are potential issues. And then when you can uncover the trends, which a tool like HR Acuity and others can help you do, then I can forestall those and get ahead of them. So I think it's exciting to be able to start to get ahead of really important issues like these. It's also big. So
it is huge. And I wanted to specifically highlight your comment on preventative measures around this, which I think a lot of companies experience. They have people, for me, I've seen happen before in other companies, is a bunch of people leave and they're like, why are they leaving? And now you have a problem of retention. And you spooked other employees that are there because they see a bunch of people leaving. And one thing that I can say that we specifically do for preventative measures is we ask our employees to leave reviews ahead of time. And that's just, going in heads on and getting straight to we need your feedback. And at that point, though, you need to be ready to receive that feedback, and ready to actually take action with what people are saying. Because if you're just asking them to, leave a nice review, it doesn't mean that's authentic. You're doing it more from a PR standpoint and marketing, and you're not really actually getting to the actual root of, what is truly going right and what's actually truly going wrong. One thing I actually use our software, our platform, and I team up with the marketing team who's giving me access to it. And I can actually ask our employees, through a campaign to leave a review. And that's something that we're working on to really roll out by the end of the year, beginning of next year, probably. To leave reviews, and we're basing it off of, how long people have been at the company for, what are marks that, future candidates would want to see reviews being left at, and really lining it up with that pre-candidate experience before they actually start interviewing with us. So
yeah, that's great, because it gives you the context that things fall into. Another example is I love that, and I like what you said before too about feedback. Feedback can be could be a challenge to accept, but you have to learn how to accept it. Another quote, someone once said to me, feedback is a gift, and it's true. How do you learn how to accept it? But yeah.
That's great.
It's good, yeah. But I was thinking what you just said around the context too. If you have the context around the things that are happening, for example, maybe things are happening in the organization after a big sales meeting, or after a new policy, or after the election or something, and being able to track to specific events or contexts. The point that you were making about people leaving the organization, et cetera. I think that the pre-exit interview is a really interesting idea. I really like that. So
that's great.
Great.
Well, I know that we're coming up on the half-hour mark. I wanted to see with both of you if there's any other points that you wanted to hit on around employee data or employee feedback before we sort of close out this discussion, this Q&A.
I would leave just a piece of advice for anybody watching and wanting to do this and really foster feedback culture, is that if you're asking employees to share their very personal opinions, you should be ready to take action on that, and don't just sit on that. It's a lot of energy, it's a lot of nerves to leave feedback on a job that provides you a living, and there's money attached to it. So if you're asking them to do this, make sure that you're ready to take that next step and actually take action.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. And I think in today's world, particularly, employees expect these cultures of transparency and trust. And, their employees are more in charge of their careers than they ever have been. They have more choices. They can go other places. And I think I think the back and forth, the feedback is, back to the original topic of the brand. I think it's a promise that the company can keep to the employee. So yeah, it's great. I really enjoyed this talk.
Me too. Yeah. I could keep going. I'm sad it's only 30 minutes.
Oh, me too. I'm like, don't even get me started. We'll be here all day.
Yeah, I have a part 2 reunion episode.
Yes, a reunion on the employee brand.
Great. Well, thank you again, both of you, so much for doing this today and talking about these issues. we really appreciate everyone joining and listening in. Don't forget, if you would like to learn more about these topics and taking preventative actions for crisis and being predictive by analyzing that employee data, you can actually download. We have a toolkit co-branded between us and HR Acuity that's actually in the little description box of this LinkedIn Live. So feel free to check that out if you want more information. But really appreciate everyone again joining and listening in today. And we will have a recording of this as well. So if you want to watch it again, you will have that at your disposal. So great. Thank you again, Elijah.
Thank you.
Have
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.